Can you kill something that big?
Sure he can. Just ask your great-grandfather. Right, Kronos? Oh, right. Yeah, my bad. Well, hello there. God of War has been one of my favorite franchises for a long time. Despite a lot of critics calling it a shallow game, I've always seen Kratos as one of the most complex characters in video gaming, with a rich history to back up. And that rich history is what made us understand him completely. Or did we? The truth might be a hard pill to swallow, yet the fact is we never really got to understand every part of Kratos. But that's not really our fault. There was a big portion of Kratos' history that we didn't get to explore, at least up until now, with the release of God of War Sons of Sparta. Welcome to the office, everyone. My name is Detective Dice, and this is my assistant, Hudson.
Watana.
And I think that now we have all that we need to finally complete the last piece of the puzzle that is Kratos. So why don't you take a seat? Let's crack this case wide open. Welcome back. Like I said before, despite playing an entire trilogy, spin-off games, and soft reboot with him, there's still a lot of aspects missing about Kratos. I know it's hard to believe because we've seen a lot of aspects of him already. We understood Kratos the warrior, the husband, the father, and even the condemned and redeemed god. We've seen the reasons behind his infamous actions and the monster that he turned into after the pact with Ares. But that was after he lost everything. What was he before that? What do we know about the man Kratos of Sparta? What was he before becoming a general, and why did he become a general in the first place? Was it just because it was the Spartan way? Contrary to the popular belief, the military life structure of Sparta is a bit more exaggerated in fiction than accurate. So, could he have been anything different, and how come we've never known anything about his dreams, ambitions, and desires before that time? Well, that's not entirely true. We actually did, but only few glimpses of that. Through some flashbacks, we've seen that he was a loving father and somewhat of a family man, but even during that time, there were hints of a deeper struggle within, and that was before the faithful pact with Ares.
His tactics were brutal, but effective. Drunk with power, he was feared by all, except one. His wife was the only one to brave his fury.
How much is enough, Kratos? When will it end?
When the glory of Sparta is known throughout the world.
The glory of Sparta. You did this for yourself.
We can clearly see that Kratos was both violent and ambitious even back then, to the point of neglecting his family sometimes. And while we would eventually get some answers to his apparent behavior through Ghost of Sparta, when we discover that he had a mother named Calypso whom he is forced to kill due to a curse put by Zeus, and a brother named Deimos who was taken by the gods Ares and Athena, fearing a prophecy of a marked warrior destroying Olympus, only for them to make said warrior, securing not their home but their destruction, as well as making Kratos grow bitter and resentful toward the gods. However though, our introduction to Deimos was a bit of a lackluster since he didn't have any time to shine or to share a meaningful moment with Kratos. But that didn't really give us any answer about his obsessive ambition, or even how he developed it alongside the rest of his manners. So most of us assumed it was due to the warrior culture of Sparta, which is partially true. Even in the future, in the Valhalla DLC, when he talks with Mimir about his wife Lysandra, he confirms pretty much the same thing. But not only that, he also confirmed that ambition was a part of it.
She was a good wife, and I was not a good husband. I refused to listen, to heed her advice. I commanded armies, had responsibilities to them I thought greater than those to her. But that was hubris, an ambition. The truth is, it never even crossed my mind to consider her advice or needs, and that was long before my oath to Ares led to.
All that was to follow. I understand, brother.
Wanting to expand the empire you're a part of is understandable. Following your orders and duty is also reasonable, but pursuing it in such an excessive way keeps this as only half a picture, especially when you hear about the other stories of other Spartans who walked more of a stable, latent path compared to Kratos, but equally sprouted in glory, ambition, and duty. Like the last Spartan, for an example, who was a soldier serving under Kratos and all in all a good guy, really one of the most innocent deaths that Kratos accidentally caused. His only crime was absolute absolute loyalty. Or like the story of Atreus and Sparta in God of War 2018.
Why'd you want to name me Atreus? I know it can't be for a god.
No, he was a soldier, a Spartan.
The great warrior?
All Spartans are great warriors. We trained from birth. Our lives were discipline, duty, battle, and death. Life was grim, and we greeted it grimly. But Atreus of Sparta was unlike the rest of us. He wore a smile even in the worst of times. He was happy. He inspired us to hope that though we were machines of war, yet there was humanity in us, goodness. When the day came for him to lay down his life in battle, his sacrifice saved countless others and turned the tide in our favor. His memory was a comfort in dark times.
Both of these examples were of Spartans who heeded their duty and military ambition with relative peace. But Kratos walked a path with blind ambition and plagued with violence, ironically turning Ares' gaze toward him and leading to his downfall in the process. So the question becomes, what pushed him to this point, excessively pursuing something one can argue he already has? It's almost like Kratos is trying to prove something, and I believe I know what that might be. In God of War Sons of Sparta, we get a glimpse of that same ambition again, and not only that, but also a peek at both the minds of Kratos and Deimos. At the start of the game, Kratos was fighting off against the Cyclops and struggling to defeat it until Deimos shows up and they take it down together. It is here that we see the difference in worldview between the two brothers.
Your tactics are improving. I was lucky you showed up when you did. Look, I shouldn't have needed. What are you doing?
No one will believe us without proof.
We're Spartans. Our word is truth enough.
We can clearly see that Kratos have more of a soldier mindset, criticizing their tactics, and even put some very high expectation on both of them. As from his point of view, he shouldn't need any help in spite of being a child. And try to discipline Deimos by saying that they don't need any trophy as their words as Spartans are proof enough, which is important to take notice of because it's gonna be relevant and we'll come back to it later. But right now, this could be seen as the influence of the Spartan upbringings, as we see that Kratos' image of Sparta is that of a place that takes pride on its soldiers believing their words to be absolute truth. But this is a positive influence and doesn't really explain where the obsession come from. Sure, you could say that Kratos look up to the soldiers and want to be like them, but that wouldn't explain going to the far extreme. Furthermore, when he comes back, we don't see his words gets honored or respected like the picture in his head. Instead, we see far more different picture from what he depicted.
Spreading wild claims about killing a river cyclops.
We are Spartans. Our words are truth enough.
Words are nothing, especially yours.
As you can see, the guard not only belittled the two brothers, but also doubted their honesty. And when Kratos tried to reinforce the line that their words supposed to be proof enough, he outright discredited it, shattering the illusion that Kratos had, also in establishing that that image of Sparta does not exist, or to be more accurate, it does not include the two brothers, as the guards seem to be fine with the other kids. So the image that he had of Sparta is one that forces that respect, as if they're not considered to be true Spartans. But the question remains, why is he not included? Well, the game was subtle about it, but we get to know the reason by the end of the game.
You think the gods have been good to us? We're two bastard kids, whose mother lives in disgrace on the fringes of society. What really have the gods ever given us?
They are both bastards, which is something that we knew for a long time, but we haven't actually considered its consequences or seen it up until now. It's probably the main reason why Deimos wants to prove himself so much and Kratos cares about status. As to how this happened exactly, the most likely scenario here that during her younger years, Calypso was somewhat of a normal member of society, whom I guess possessed some beauty and due to pure misfortune found herself alone one night, and then whom, if Greek mythology teaches us anything about, probably proceed to trick her into sleeping with them consensually? I hope?
Inawatana.
Anyway, this is probably the reason behind his deep obsession, as being a bastard that is looked down upon by others would leave you with serious craving of validation, respect, and sense of belonging. It's also the reason why he clings to that specific version of Sparta, because it would force the validation that he craves. And in Kratos' view, the fastest and most secure way to do so is becoming a soldier. We can clearly see that beliefs when he talked to Deimos about how being anything but a soldier is stupid.
Not being a soldier is not being a Spartan. And our duty is to Sparta.
What if I didn't stay in the army? What if I wanted to fish or make music?
Then you would be a fool. You can never be a citizen. This is all we have.
It makes sense because being the emphasis of the Spartan culture, they get the highest respect, authority, and acknowledgement, so no one will look down on Kratos again and his words would be true. Great, so now we understand where the obsession came from and it's valid given their condition, but it still doesn't explain how did it spiral out of control. It's one thing wanting to be revered and respected, it's another thing entirely when your way of doing it is killing villagers left and right. So the question becomes, what went wrong? Well, throughout the rest of the game, it becomes clear that Kratos has somewhat of a one-track mindset. When he puts his mind to do something, he completely focuses on it alone, and he come to view other things as obstacles in his way, something that Deimos pointed out.
Can I ask you something without you going all quiet on me?
No promises.
You ever think about love?
Is this about Lysandra again?
She likes you. She talks to you like you're more than just a spear and a shield. That's rare.
Lysandra's... She's great. She's not my priority. Maybe someday. But right now, I'm trying to make the Vanguard circle. That means training harder than everyone else. Every hour, every day.
You think love's gonna slow you down?
I think distractions get you killed.
This explains a lot about Kratos and his actions. Viewing all the warnings and alternatives as just distractions, that's how he got easily tunnel visioned into destroying everything, not realizing the consequences up until very late. But that's still not everything. We also got to see what plants the seed of brutality inside Kratos. Most people chucked it to Ares' influence on him, but throughout the series we've seen that this is something that exists in Kratos even before the Pact. And the one who planted that seed was the Krypteia, a high-ranking soldier that goes all in solo mission throughout Sparta. He seemed to operate on the mindset that these actions were necessary for the protection of Sparta, even though they look cruel. I say his point of view because other Spartan like Deimos, Atreus, and Kratos' teacher did not share the same mindset.
Sir, a question.
Ask.
The Krypteia. I heard stories. They say the way your order fights is different from other soldiers. Cruel. More brutal than necessary.
Necessary? Who decides what is necessary? Some politician? One who has forgotten how to carry a spear? Battle means nothing if the enemy believes they can fight another. It is not enough to defeat them. You must teach them. You make them recognize that to stand against Sparta is to invite annihilation. Very necessary, boys.
What's interesting to take notice of that even in spite of the one-track mindset Kratos had, there was only one thing that he could never turn his back onto.
Family.
Yeah, Vin Diesel would be proud. Jokes aside though, this is really the perfect contradiction for Kratos. Because technically speaking, the only thing that is holding Kratos back is his own brother. Not only he keeps getting them into these adventures that goes against their orders, but also Kratos has somewhat of a better partner candidate. Prontus. He is somewhat of an antagonist in this game, at least a douchebag. Supposedly, he and Kratos used to be friends before as they trained together and even shared the same dream of joining the Vanguard Circle, but they ended up separating. And what was the reason, you ask? Well, Deimos asked the same question.
When I was little, I remember you and Grontus were always together, training, hunting, laughing. What happened?
You did. You grew old enough to hold a spear. Showed me you were a true Spartan. Better than Brontus could ever be. That's who I wanted by my side.
You're just saying that because you're my brother.
I'm saying it because it's true. Brontus knew it. We were never the same. And that's just fine by me.
Kratos has deep love and a sense of duty toward his brother. It's the reason why he goes hard on him in training. He is actually worried about something that all the Spartans go through, the Artemis cradle. When Spartans reach a certain age, they are put on display and whipped in front of everyone else, including their family. In one of the dialogues with the Krypteia, Kratos mentioned that he's afraid for his brother's sake.
What troubles you, boy?
My time on the Artemis cradle. I endured it. Barely. My brother's turn is next summer, and I worry.
You think he's not ready.
I know he is not.
The cradle is a true test of body and spirit. As our loved ones watch us suffer, they too suffer. Pick someone. One who means something. Focus only on them. And be strong for them. Ease their burden, and in doing so, ease your own. Understand?
That makes a strange amount of sense.
To endure the Artemis cradle is the mark of a true Spartan.
Thank you, sir.
That actually got through to Kratos because it aligned with his perspective about family. But Kratos is actually biased because another dialogue that also made a lot of sense did not get through to him.
Advice. Your brother. He is in your charge.
I watch out for him, as any brother would.
Yet every man beside you is your brother. That is what it means to be Spartan. If you look out for just one, you weaken the whole.
Of course, sir. But he is family. Aside from my mother, the only family I have.
He is a soldier, same as you. But if you spend your time shielding him, you leave another exposed. You do not have a brother in the unit. You have brothers. All of them.
Even though the Kryptea's idea made sense, Kratos was still reluctant to follow that one, and even tried to push for the family view more, only to find that the Kryptea was firm in his belief. Furthermore, it's the theme of family that Deimos uses in order to persuade Kratos to continue the search for Vasilis, asking him what will he do if he was the one that gone missing.
We're not just doing this to impress a certain Amazon.
Relax. Since when have you been so cynical?
Birth.
Look, what would you tell Mother if it was me lost?
You first.
Of course, Deimos isn't doing this just for Vasilis' sake. We mentioned that he was under the same desire of approval as Kratos. But he also wanted to impress a girl that he likes called Amara, since she was also a friend of Vasilis. Yet, he does believe that no Spartan should be left behind, hinting at a kind heart, making him really just the perfect foil for Kratos. Because while Kratos is content just existing, Deimos is trying to push both of them to live their lives to the fullest, often urging Kratos to look at everything that he knows with a different light, to learn how to appreciate all that is around him.
I recognize that. It's an Aulos.
Played poorly.
I remember seeing reeds at Vasilis' hideout in the cistern. Did he carve an Aulos?
A waste of time.
What, music? Seriously? I know your interests are narrow, but you're picking a fight with music?
We'll use our bus to pick up his trail. Split up.
This must be one of the altars Eleonora mentioned. Do we just put our sandals on it, like we do with Lycurgus? Nike provides.
You're coming around.
Maybe. And if I can learn to respect this, you can learn to respect music, like Vasilis and me.
Deimos.
Musical training is a more potent instrument than any other because rhythm and harmony find their way into the soul.
You're quoting an Athenian to me?
Doesn't make him wrong.
We've also been shown that he knows how to handle Kratos.
Brother, what are we doing? We've searched all over Sparta and only found what we already knew. That Vasilis was as frustrating in life as this search for him has become.
There are still many places to explore. He could be anywhere.
Exactly. Anywhere. Nowhere. This is futile.
You want to hit something, don't you?
I so badly do.
Okay. This room is full of junk no one's using. Let's smash all of it. Let out our frustrations.
I failed to see what breaking pottery will accomplish.
First, it's fun. Second, it'll help us build focus. And third, it's fun. You go first. Go on. I promise you'll like it. You are not done already. Come on. You know you like breaking pots.
I needed that.
Me too.
As you saw, whenever Kratos gets angry, he knows how to get him to vent his frustration in a healthy manner. And when he's neglecting himself and ignoring joy, he humors his way into making him laugh, which is crazy. I mean, the only one who managed to do that was Mimir, and well, he's the smartest man alive. But it's even more than that, because Deimos was expanding Kratos' horizon. One of the main themes of the game is finding your own role in the world, something that every character struggled with in a different way. Some knew what they wanted, like Amara, who chose to be with her father in Sparta to learn how to be a warrior like her Amazonia's mother, but at the cost of handling other duties that she did not like or had the skills for, like sculpturing. Some dedicate themselves to the duty given to them by the city, like the temple maid, wasting their lives and often wondering what could have happened if they haven't chosen it. And others like to experiment, like Vasilis, who didn't latch onto one thing and went to find something that makes him useful to his people, something that he's good at. And then there is others like Kratos who only focus on one thing and didn't give themselves the opportunity to try anything else. It's a shame really, because this game showed us that Kratos could have been more than a soldier, and all the other games showed us his various skills. Of course, combat's still his forte, but with his determination he could have taken any job he wanted. But perhaps the greatest horizon that Deimos expanded to Kratos was the possibility of love, as we see that Kratos did have a crush on Lysandra back then, but he didn't want any distraction from his goal until Deimos showed him it doesn't have to be one on the other. Later on, we see that Kratos have built an appreciation for music and a family with Lysandra, even going as far as to carve a flute for his daughter, Deimos' influence no doubt. But I guess the most ironic and sad thing about all of this, that Deimos was also Kratos' consciousness, as he and his journey were the things that finally forced Kratos to reflect on his actions.
You okay, brother?
I don't know anymore.
What happened? What did Brontus mean when he said, you did it too?
In late spring, there were mock battles meant to test my command. Team exercises. There was a role I knew had no chance of success. I put Vasilis in that role. Every time. Every team. Every battle.
Well, you were hoping it would force him to rise to the occasion.
He could only fail. Always no-win situations, always in the most exposed position of the phalanx. Always a decoy to be sacrificed quickly.
Why waste a valuable soldier on a lost cause? It had to be someone.
Every time? When there was nothing at stake save my reputation? It was my duty to make him better. I never gave him a chance. I just wanted to win.
What matters is that you recognize your mistake. Don't despair.
We have to find him.
Even though Deimos tried to look at it in a more positive light, saying that his brother was teaching him a lesson, Kratos admits the truth. He was only looking out for himself. Remember, it took Kratos losing his family, killing an entire pantheon, losing a second daughter figure in Pandora, and destroying the world in order to reflect on his actions the first time around. And here we see Deimos getting him to admit it through a simple journey. Granted, this is an emotional journey and Kratos is much younger, but we can clearly see that he's just as stubborn as he will be as an adult. As for the most of the journey, Kratos was actively trying to stop the search for Vasilis, following his brother's whims by guilt until the end of the game when he finally is convinced that it's the right thing to do. Speaking of Vasilis, he's the ultimate unfortunate soul in this game. He didn't have a supportive figure in his life like Kratos did to Deimos, and he was deemed unworthy by Sparta. He didn't even get a search party in his death, even though he was desperately trying to find a way to be useful for Sparta. He was trying different things: sculpture, music, archery, cooking, efforts that went by unnoticed. The main theme of this game is duty, and the entire story was revolving around finding the meaning of it, and it ended up being doing the right thing even if it comes at your own peril. Sadly enough, Kratos himself would stray far from the same lesson that he learned during that time. After Deimos, his compass got kidnapped. Ironically, the biggest mistake of the gods, because Kratos, to everyone's surprise, was once loyal to the gods, thinking that every item he took was a blessing meant for him. And even when the others tried to convince him otherwise, he was so firm in his belief. I'm sure you're wondering, where did all that gratefulness came from? And how could a man so loyal to the gods turn to their ultimate hater and eventual destroyer? Well, the answer was the only thing that Kratos ever cared about: his family.
Noble Athena, grant us your divine wisdom as we search for our missing friend.
You're praying? Why?
Because the gods watch over us. They protect us.
And how has that gone for Vasilis?
Look at all they've provided. They've been good to us.
You think the gods have been good to us? We're two bastard kids, whose mother lives in disgrace on the fringes of society. What really have the gods ever given us?
They gave me you.
At his heart of heart, Kratos was a family man, one who loved those around him more than he would allow himself to show. A man who's desperate to prove his worth through the only thing that he knows: fighting. A good man deep down who's often getting in his own way, and those loved ones kept him in check. His story is of a man who didn't see much in himself, so he held to the guiding light of those he loved, losing his way the moment he lost them, not realizing he himself carried that light, that hope deep within. through their memory and teachings. Sadly, it was only grief and anger which blinded him to the truth, which makes the ending of God of War 3 all that poetic, as a single reminder of that past in Pandora guided him toward that light within, the same light he doubted he had his entire life. Whew. That was it for the analysis. I know that some people didn't like the game, and it does have a lot of issues, but I feel like it cleared a lot about Kratos, making his Greek tragedy complete in a way. But what about you? What did you think? I'm really interested to know, so leave a comment down below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because according to the analytics, a lot of you are not subscribed. It's the best way to support the channel right now, and trust me, since you made it this far, you're gonna love the rest of the content that will be coming. And while at it, ring the bell, because YouTube would otherwise literally pretend like I never uploaded a video. You could also check the rest of the content on the channel. Right now we have an analysis video about the character Omni-Man from Invincible, and theory videos about the game Zenless Zone Zero. There's also 2 other videos in the making about the series The Boys and the game Devil May Cry. Not to mention, there will be another God of War video about God of War Laufey coming soon. So stay tuned for that. Thanks again for watching till the end. My name was Detective Dice, and I'll hope to see you all on the next case.